So cool. I don't know why the half of the camera's blank. Okay. Oh, on my laptop. Great. So we're going to read from Loving Someone with Bipolar Disorder. This is something that partners or spouses can use, and also individuals with bipolar disorder, because it gives goal setting today for partners or spouses, as well as goals for your own stability, or however close you can get to stability. So, setting goals. You must set clear, attainable, realistic goals that carefully consider the limitations that bipolar disorder puts on a relationship. You should set realistic limits on how much you will do. Goals that are attainable. Your goals should always take into account that facts of bipolar disorder and not assume that the illness will just vanish one day, even though that would be really nice. You can say to yourself, I may be crawling today, but I'm still on my path. I wonder if that has to do with the door. I'll work on that another day. I didn't know my laptop would work. Okay, so, and I thank you. I think it's views that let you be on your laptop or your phone. So thank you for the views. Okay, goals are different from plans. Sometimes a goal may seem impossible because there are so many roadblocks along the way. Many people quit trying to reach their goals when the problems seem impossible to fix. But help yourself stay on track. The goal that needs to change when things get tough. Instead, it is the plan that needs changing. Maybe you need new tools, a different way of looking at the situation. So remember, which when reaching a goal, such as achieving a more stable relationship, seems difficult or impossible, your plans for how to arrive at your goal may have to change occasionally, but your goal can stay the same. And I think that's all I wanted to do in this book. Okay. So, realistic sleep hygiene, diet. I'm trying to think of some other things can be goals. I would say rationing the amount you watch news right now, because the world news is not very positive. But, everybody should have an idea of what's going on in the world. So, but maybe a goal would be to limit your news watching, and maybe what kind of movies and TVs you watch. Maybe it doesn't mean you couldn't always watch like violent or scary or Halloweeny, all those Halloween movies. But perhaps at certain points in your mania, hypomania, stability, depression, maybe lighter fare in terms of TV, movies. I should add streaming. I should add YouTube, but don't give up my channel. Yeah. So, I'd even write these down. Journaling, if I haven't said it already, is, well, it's a very good thing for regular folk. And it's a good thing for mental illness, because besides like workbook pages, you can take your journal to your psychiatrist. Although if it's psychomeds only, then if you go to a psychologist, counselor, you might want to take, your notes in. So maybe you can see in your journal down what the circumstances are. So not a bad idea at all to journal with mental illness or just a normal person. Okay. All right. This is kind of related. It'll be a minor bipolar backroom miracle, not a complete huge miracle, but a bipolar backroom miracle, because we're on module 6, unwanted travelers. Let's see how it relates to the other book. In this module, you will learn about some of the other types of symptoms that are not strictly part of bipolar disorder, but may come along with this condition. I was wrong. It's other symptoms. Pardon me while I cross my legs. Symptoms accompanying bipolar disorder. So 3 of these symptoms are irritability, psychosis, and suicidal feelings. We will give special attention to these. Also, comorbid disorders. So, for instance, if you're bipolar but also diabetic, if you're bipolar and you have COPD, which has something to do with your lungs and your heart. Look up the letters for that sucker. Okay. Attention deficit disorder, ADHD, borderline personality disorder, and eating disorders. So this is totally my human opinion, has nothing to do with any level of education. I feel as though we diagnose too many people now with ADHD. So things I've been reading about my career in elementary school, boys are moving and grooving, and they definitely need recess. They definitely need gym. They definitely, not all the time I would do this, but a brain break where they could move around the classroom a little and talk to people. Do that, not every day, take sense of what's going on. So like a 5-minute brain break, the girls enjoy it too. So if you look at the research about adolescent boys and girls are built to be good students. They sit still, they're quiet, they take it in, they do the homework, they have goals. They want to go to certain high schools, or they want to be higher level in math courses or English courses. So talk about goals, like some of the girl students in middle school definitely have goals, and they can have a lot of moments of not moving and grooving. But the boys need it. Now, I would use group work, and how I picked my groups, which that can make or break group work, is I would put numbers on ping pong balls. Ping pong balls can be a bad idea. And then they take them and then they put them in something else. Problem with my students was they would still go to the table for the group that they wanted to be. And if more than one of them did, it was hard to figure out how many people were doing that. But at least 2 did it every time. Also, you can pair them with people they sit next to. The way I would see middle schoolers is I start at the beginning of the year, I do boy, girl, boy, girl, boy, girl. And then I do girl, boy. So the girl ends up behind the boy, girl, boy, girl, boy, girl. And I do the whole room like that. Sometimes it's very successful because the girls are chatty and the boys get not perfect ideas. Like sometimes, how can I disrupt this class ideas? And if they're close to other boys who back them up. So getting back to it, like I feel like there are true ADHD students. I heard an adult on one thing that I watch in her early 40s, and somebody tested her for ADHD. I don't know how they do that. And they're telling her now in her 40s she's ADHD. And her husband was already ADHD. So I have to watch that couple. They make videos about raising kids and about ADHD, and they try to find humor in it. And I think she definitively wasn't thrilled with the diagnosis because she thought she had a better handle on things than her husband. And any illness, any behavioral situation can show itself differently in different human beings. Her husband's ADHD might totally show different facets than her ADHD. So here's what I'm saying. Middle schoolers. The boys need more movement. So what I would do is either lecture or present my lesson for like 20 minutes, do some kind of group work or project for another 15 minutes, and maybe tie it all up in 10 minutes. My last experience was only 45 minutes. 55 minutes is better because then you can definitely cover what you want, tie it up, and get home. Why I'm telling you this in the bipolar back room, I don't know. What I'm saying is these comorbidities, ADHD, heart disease, cholesterol, diabetes, this all is going to affect your mental illness. And in our case, we're focusing. Not that we won't ever mention the other 4 disorders that I covered in my research. Okay, so enough said on that. Irritability, mania, and depression. I had no idea when I started researching that, well, maybe I had a little idea, but not a big idea, of how you can be irritable in mania. People can be irritable with depression. As you have the illness longer, you can start to possibly check yourself when you see this irritability happening and a mania or a hypomania happening, or irritability and a depression happening. As your life goes on, you may key into these things. And certainly if you have a partner very anxious to be a helpmate and a big part of your support net, whether it's a partner or a spouse, you certainly really need them on your team. If they're not, I would say maybe an extra other person in your circle or safety net. And one thing I'm just going to mention, I'm not quite sure how it relates, but in all my education to be an educator and talk about meetings, if you make a professional group in a situation, if you have more than 5 people it's not helpful. So if you zero in on 5 people in a job or a study group or whatever, 5 is an ultimate number. And if you ever, just every person, if you ever notice in a meeting how many people are there, and this is not a whole job meeting where everybody would come, but a side meeting, 5 is ideal, 6 is too many, 3 might not be enough. So there's something about wherever I learned this in education that, so maybe we can equate that to your support group. Maybe 2 or 3 relatives, 2 or 3 friends, but end up with a nice mix of maybe 5. And maybe a backup person if somebody's out of town. Okay. So irritability is often present in mania, sometimes coming and going with the flow of events. Sometimes they're with a life of its own. Often it is the face of mania the others first see and are most affected. However, irritability can also be a part of depression. It is not uncommon for people to get snappy when they're depressed, or often men in particular will cover up depressed or anxious feelings with irritability. Identifying and handling anger and irritability is covered in more detail in Module 14. And most likely, we'll get there. Psychosis can complicate the situation. Psychosis is usually defined as having delusions and hallucinations. So in these 2 paragraphs, I tried to pick out things that help us understand the difference between hallucinations and delusions. Hallucinations are part of schizophrenia. But what they're saying here, since the title of this book is Overcoming Bipolar Disorder, able to have hallucinations or delusions with this illness. So let's see if we can pinpoint these 2. Psychosis is usually defined as having delusions or hallucinations. Delusions are fictions or hunches. They are conclusions that are falsely held more than they are opinions. For instance, if you believe you were President Millard Fillmore's brother or sister, that would be a delusion. Okay. Hallucinations are false sensations, usually sounds or visions, but also sometimes smells or tastes or feelings on the skin. So I hope that's clear. If not, we'll certainly, delve into maybe each of them in an episode. Probably only overlap them a little bit because I want us to have the definitions for both, and they differ. All right, this is Harriet's story. And I just want to see, I think we have time for Harriet's story. Signs and clues brought Harriet to the hospital. She was convinced from reading the pattern of the traffic lights for the prior week that her daughter was in grave danger. In particular, she was afraid that her daughter was going to be molested, as Harriet herself had been as a young woman. She was so concerned that she was up to 3 nights straight traveling the city looking at traffic lights, and far from being tired, she was energized the following days and spent hundreds of dollars on various security systems as well as DVDs of movies that would give her clues to the identity of her daughter's future assailant. When she arrived at the hospital looking for help, she was talking rapidly, was very easily irritated. She had been treated at the hospital clinic several years for post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, and insisted that was all that was wrong with her. Eventually, she agreed to come into the hospital to take medications, and her mania and psychosis lessened. As Harriet and her care providers discussed the events for the prior week, it became clear that this month was the anniversary of her rape. She had begun to have nightmares and flashbacks again and had stopped sleeping, initially by her own willpower, to avoid the nightmares. The sleep deprivation then taken on a life of its own, and coupled with daytime stress of PTSD symptoms, apparently led her first manic episode, which included psychotic features, disillusions. Okay, so I want you to see in the middle of that a lack of sleep hygiene. She was avoiding nightmares and bad dreams about her past rape, and she was putting intentions on keeping her daughter from having one or being raped when there was no imminent danger. Always, better to be observant and careful. And so that consistent lack of sleep led her to the hospital and additional mental health symptoms besides the PTSD. So, goals will probably come up again. Hallucinations and delusions might come up again. I don't know where they'll go. In planning for tomorrow, I'm going to look again at this, handling bipolar with spouses and partners, and going through the next module in the Overcoming Bipolar Disorder, a comprehensive workbook for managing your symptoms and achieving your goals by Bauer, Kilborn, Greenwald, Ludman, and McBride. Take care. Have a nice night. Bye.